Story 1. Struck by lightning. I'm fine. I was in my work truck. Apparently, it was quite the show. I bought a lottery ticket, but I didn't win. Story 2. I never thought I would go to college. Yet here I am, a week before finals, sharing my thoughts with someone online. Story 3. I discovered that I was the person in the friend group whom everyone kept around as a joke and to play with. I genuinely believed they cared about me and I loved them. Story 4. Cancer diagnosis 1 month after my stepdad was diagnosed. I was 41 with 3 children, ages 2, 7, and 17, while going through a divorce. Thankfully, I am here to share that years later. Story 5. I never thought I would go to a psychiatric ward. I didn't know what a manic episode was like until I experienced my first and only one. Story 6. Have a normal heart rate. I have had inappropriate sinus tachycardia all my life, and I am now recovering from heart surgery with a steady heart rate between 65 and 85. Before my surgery, it was normal for my heart rate to go up to 160, and my resting heart rate was around 110. Story 7. I had a baby who passed away after being here for a month. Nothing prepares you for the death of a child. Story 8. I always felt silly telling people my dreams of getting my Doctor of Philosophy in neuroscience. I begin my program in August, and it still doesn't feel real when I talk about it. Story 9. I had a challenging start in life, but I earned my bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering last December. I am in my 30s and was a high school dropout. I worked various jobs and never imagined I would be doing anything like this. Story 10. Get into an abusive relationship. I thought I was fine, and it was mostly financial and emotional, but it's difficult. I always prided myself on being so smart that I would never get stuck in a bad relationship. I didn't know you could wake up one day and realize the situation has turned toxic. A word of advice to anyone reading this: people don't change, but they can get worse. So don't just roll your eyes and forgive everything. Protect your happiness and peace first, because you don't want to be where I am. It's a cold and difficult day when you realize that all the effort you put into building a life with someone is meaningless because they take pleasure in your suffering in some way. Also, if you ever find yourself on your knees crying and begging to be loved correctly and they're just standing over you with a blank expression, run. Don't stop to grab your shoes. It will only get worse, and you have already stayed in that relationship too long. Story 11. I got pregnant at 41 and had a baby girl after trying for 17 years. I had wanted a baby girl for as long as I can remember. I still can't believe it finally happened. She's 6 now, and I still pinch myself over it. Story 12. My husband died suddenly at the age of 53. I did not expect to become a widow with 2 children. Fortunately, he considered this possibility and had a life insurance policy to provide for us. Story 13. I never thought I would feel better in my late 40s than I did in my 20s. I had a hysterectomy in November, and I only wish I could have had it a couple of decades ago. It was the best decision ever. It took over 20 years of doctors dismissing my complaints, but one finally listened to me. They probably figured I'm not going to have more babies at my age. I didn't realize how much pain I was in until I wasn't. I knew it hurt, but even the good days didn't feel like this. My pain levels are 0. I have energy. I can sleep. I'm not riding a ragged edge of irritability all the time. Also, sex is a whole new level of enjoyment. Story 14. Divorce. My parents have been married for almost 50 years. Dedication and resolving issues is part of my upbringing. However, I draw the line at infidelity. Story 15. Beachside home with a view of the sunset every night. I was homeless 25 years ago, and now I feel fortunate for what I have. Story 16. Moving on from my first crush. I thought I would be lost without her. Now, when I think of her, I realize I truly dodged a bullet. Story 17. My husband of 27 years cheated on me. I now live 10 hours away in a different country, am divorced and free from a controlling individual. Story 18. Going to college, being independent, and having a career will allow me to retire without relying on anyone for anything. Story 19. I was in a car accident in 2008 where my fiancé died. and I do not remember my last month with her. Story 20. The death of my younger brother was unexpected for me. I thought I would die first because I am older, and he appeared to be so physically fit. Story 21. I went partially blind out of nowhere with no symptoms and no known cause. It's pretty scary. I knock on wood every day that my other eye remains unaffected. Story 22. I got into a car accident. My friend had just received her license, and my parents didn't want me to ride in the car with her, but I convinced them to let me go. Story 23. I slipped twice in my life on a banana peel that someone littered on the ground. It's quite ridiculous when you don't know why you suddenly lose your balance. Story 24. Divorce. If you are reading this and are not yet married, get a prenuptial agreement. Divorce is much more legally and financially complicated than you can imagine, and a prenuptial agreement is your chance to avoid that. Story 25. I am taking a sabbatical from my job of 20 years to rest, meditate, and discover what I want to do for the next 20 years of my life. Story 26. I never thought I would live with my dad and leave my abusive stepdad. I never thought I would go to a school where I wasn't the outcast and the whole school didn't dislike me. I never thought the same person who hurt me mentally for so many years would attend therapy and parenting classes and work so hard to see me again. I never thought I would want to be in the same room as him again, let alone make new good memories with him. I never thought I would be diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and autism and finally understand why people didn't like me. I never thought I would have my own room, and I definitely never thought the anxiety I felt every day would get better and my life would become as good as it is right now. Story 27. Getting married, becoming an addict. I'm in recovery now. Losing my best friend at such a young age, and owning a home are just a few of the many experiences I've had. Life is indeed crazy. Story 28. Divorced, but looking back, I realize I didn't know myself fully when I got married, so I understand now. Now, the time I won a Fruitopia-themed bucket hat off the bottom of a bottle cap, that is something I truly never thought I would experience, and I never expect to experience it again. I never win anything. I wore it until it was worn out. Story 29. I was diagnosed in 1982 with a life-threatening condition. Since then, I have had cancer twice, but I am still here and celebrated my 70th birthday in January. Story 30. I am 61 years old and have never been bitten by a dog, but a month ago, a pit bull attacked my dog. I grabbed her, and the dog bit my arm several times. I never thought I would be bitten by a dog. However, my Chiweenie is okay and didn't get hurt badly, and I incurred under $1,000 in medical bills, which the other person paid. Story 31. Get in and out of an abusive relationship. A young person could not see the numerous red flags before entering the relationship, believing it would be healthy solely because he was a family friend. Sadly, that was not the case. I was in and out of that relationship for a year and a half and was only able to leave when my life was genuinely at risk. The day I left, I literally ran and hid from him for hours until I could borrow a phone and call the police for help. Story 32. I stopped a girl from jumping off a bridge next to my house. Felt like something from a movie. This happened in December last year and still feels like a fever dream. Story 33. Cancer at 36, and this year marks 5 years cancer-free. Sometimes it still feels like a strange dream. Then, my child was diagnosed with a rare genetic progressive eye disease at 12, with no warning signs other than an inability to see in the dark. Their vision has already diminished to legally blind status. Story 34. Never thought I would get ghosted for no reason by the person who promised we would always return to being friends if nothing else. Story 35. I never thought I would eat meat. However, after tasting it, I realized that those animals are meant for consumption. Story 36. I never thought I would go from having everything: family, financial security, love, a talented creative mind, and all the good things life had to offer, to suddenly having a full-blown cocaine addiction. What started as recreational use in college turned into an addiction that cost me everything. I lost my family, my money, my self-worth, my children, my husband, my looks, and much of my sanity. I lost a lot of time, including time spent in jail. In the end, it was all gone. By all rights, I shouldn't even be breathing, but somehow, after almost 25 years lost, I had an epiphany while sitting on the concrete floor of a jail cell. I had just been sentenced to another 2 years before I could try for early release, crying my eyes out when it hit me. I just couldn't do it anymore. That moment in time marked my decision to turn my life around. Sure, I still had 2 more years to serve, but when I was finally set free, I made the commitment to change. It took a lot of work. Much of the damage I had done in my addiction was irreversible, but with time, therapy, and a desire to see a different side of myself that I hadn't seen in a quarter century, I succeeded. I do it every day. In fact, just this past April 1st, I celebrated 20 years clean. If you knew me even a little, you would understand that 20 seconds clean was a miracle for me. So yes, I never thought I would become an addict. It wasn't exactly what I dreamed of being as a child. Then again, I used to want to become a mermaid when I grew up. Neither being an addict nor a mermaid worked out that well. Just as well, I became me when I grew up, and that is just fine. Story 37. I finally lost enough feelings to leave my ex. Before, it felt impossible because every time I tried to leave, I experienced horrible emotional pain. Felt like I couldn't go on without him. Eventually, after discussing my problems with him repeatedly, I realized that things would never change and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life with someone who treated me poorly. I was finally able to break up with him without begging for him back. I won't lie, I did hook up with him once since the breakup because the intimacy was good, but at least I'm not in a relationship with him anymore. Story 38. Grade 7 band trip. I got to stay in a hotel. I remember thinking life can't get better than this. I never thought I would get to experience that. That shows how poor we were. Story 39. I was in a serious accident more than 5 years ago. I lost my fiancée and my job. I broke both my arms, some ribs, and one of my lungs collapsed while the other was failing. I also broke my jaw and collarbone. I was in a coma and woke up a month later in a wheelchair. I had to live in a group home to regain my leg strength. Story 40. Moved to a foreign country by myself. I lived there for a year, which was always the plan, and I had a great time, but what was I thinking? Story 41. I never thought I would have my life and my baby's life threatened by an alcoholic neighbor, causing us to move out abruptly with no plan while I am 7 months pregnant. Now, I am facing the 30-day countdown to our girl's birth while curled up in a family friend's basement with no leads on a new apartment. Don't get me wrong, I am thankful we have a place to go, especially 6 months after the birth, but this is not what I thought would be happening. Story 42. I never thought I would have to navigate my adult life without my dad. There are so many things I want to ask him, especially as I grow older. Embrace your dads and tell them you love them. They can be gone faster than you think. Story 43. When I was young and an early teenager, I struggled with alcoholism. From the age of 16 to 22, I made the transition to sobriety. Now, I have been sober for 3 months. Story 44. Become a sex worker at a brothel. I also have another job, but I never thought life would lead me here as a single woman in this economy. Story 45. I experienced epilepsy unexpectedly. No one in my family has it, but it appears I was born with the condition, which did not manifest until my mid-20s. After multiple brain surgeries, I continue to have frequent seizures. It has become difficult for me to use the bathroom while my significant other is sleeping, as it often causes them distress after being together for over a decade. I am reaching my limit. You all deserve the best lives you are capable of living. Story 46. Being in an abusive relationship and having an abortion helped me cut all ties. I always thought I was smarter than that, and it turns out I wasn't. I never thought I could live with myself if I ever had an abortion, but here I am, surviving and doing better than ever because I was at least smart enough to make that choice. Story 47. I saw an asteroid that lit up the night so bright it looked like daytime. I was driving with my boyfriend at 4:30 toward the mountains. It turned green, and I realized I could see the mountains even though they were far away and hours from daylight. He slowed the car down and looked around like rural kids visiting a big city in a movie. It was crazy. I had seen videos of this sort of thing, but I never thought I would experience it. Story 48. Leaving a job without another opportunity lined up is not ideal under normal circumstances. And in this market, it is particularly risky. However, the situation was that dire, and I believe I would not have survived mentally had I continued working there. Story 49. Deciding to never have children. I spent most of my life with the one certainty being that I wanted to be a mother. Trauma affected that, and now I don't think I will ever change my mind. I am not having children. Story 50. I never thought I would go to college, but I put myself through school and ended up getting a master's degree, becoming the first college graduate in my family. My obstetrician and gynecologist said I probably would never have kids, but I have two wonderful grown children who are now independent adults. It's amazing how life turns out. Story 51. Contracting a sexually transmitted infection after being careful and falling in love with someone who recently ended a long-term relationship can be concerning. It's important to know someone's background before feeling safe enough to be intimate, as not everyone is mindful of the health risks they may carry. Story 52. Trump's second term. I thought Americans had more common sense than to elect an acquitted rapist and convicted felon twice. Story 53. I never thought I would have kids. I got pregnant while using a birth control implant. Now, here I am with my 1-month-old, and I thank God every day for this blessing. Story 54. After a fun DNA test, I discovered that my father had a secret family before us. I had a sister. I never expected that, as my father is pious in appearance. Story 55. I wouldn't say I never thought about it because there was a time before I was an addict. However, after I got into opioids, I never thought I would be clean from them. I spent close to 15 years in active addiction, literally all my adult life at the time I got clean. Don't get me wrong, I had periods of sobriety, but they were always months long, and once I got close to a year, I always thought I was going to die using. I felt hopeless and was using an overwhelming amount of drugs. Now, it's been 5.5 years since I last used any opioid, let alone heroin or fentanyl. Now that I've been clean and I've heard about the dangerous substances in drugs, I am absolutely not going back to that life. I even acquired a trade skill, discovering things I enjoy that don't involve drugs, which is honestly overwhelming being in my late 30s and still figuring out simple aspects of myself and life. However, I wouldn't trade this for the hell I came from. I will smoke occasionally and have a few drinks at work functions, but only if the company pays for it and there's enough time to not affect my performance. This is what works for me. Story 56. Having a child has been a journey for me. I struggled with fertility for 8 years and came to terms with the possibility that I might not be able to have a child. However, I gave birth in 2023, and my little one is now 18 months old. Story 57. I never thought I would be living in my van by the river, but that was the first thing I did after some oil field layoffs. Story 58. Connecting with someone online and ending up in bed together within hours of meeting in real life is just the beginning of an exciting adventure. Story 59. I'm nearly 30, but in the last 6 months, I have developed an allergy to dogs. I can't believe it. Story 60. Become a heroin addict. I want to make it clear. Not because I look down on addicts, absolutely not at all, but just because I never thought life would bring me there, and, subsequently, think I could ever make it out of that dark tunnel. But here I am. Story 61. I never thought this would happen to me was a theme repeated over a span of 5 years. My husband cheated and I asked for a divorce. 2 weeks later, my best friend unexpectedly died of cancer. 1.5 years later, I was living with my boyfriend, who committed suicide. Shortly after, I lost my job and changed my career path due to the pandemic. 1 year later, I discovered through 23andMe that my dad isn't my biological father. 1 year later, I fell about 9 feet and fractured a quarter of my skull, resulting in a traumatic brain injury and over a year of chronic vomiting. I am now happily married and 9 months pregnant with our second child. For years, I believed I was extremely unlucky, but now I see how fortunate I truly am. Story 62. Losing my job because of sexual, racial, and age discrimination. Maybe I should have seen it coming because I am a female engineer in my 20s, but growing up, girls around me were encouraged to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In university, my classes had an equal gender distribution, so I didn't think it was a significant issue. Little did I know there is a reason why the wider industry still only has 13 to 14% women in the engineering sector. Apparently, what I observed throughout my life is not representative of society as a whole. Story 63. Being a dad is a remarkable experience. It somehow happened while on birth control, but I was fortunate enough to share this journey with the right person. Despite the challenges early on, there is nowhere else I would rather be. I hope that everyone in a similar situation perseveres to realize that they can do it and that it is worth it. The joy, love, and light that parenthood brings are profound. Life is sacred, and everyone has a purpose. Story 64. I never thought my well-laid plans for financial security during retirement and my good work in the federal government would be in danger just years before retirement. Story 65. Get married. I was 38 when I met my wife. I never thought I would marry or that I wanted to get married, but then I met her and quickly realized that I wanted to marry her. Here we are, 25 years later. Story 66. Positive. Owning a home is something I never thought would be possible. I am grateful every day and often pinch myself to remind me that it's real. Negative. I never anticipated developing agoraphobia. I used to be a social butterfly who loved adventure, and it seemed to strike out of nowhere. I couldn't even check my mailbox, and it was awful. Story 67. Having 4 miscarriages and 4 children, I miss the woman I was before those losses. I am grateful for how those experiences have shaped me, and for all my children on earth. Story 68. I never thought I would survive a nervous breakdown following a seriously bad breakup. Almost 9 years ago, I experienced my first panic attack. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. The depression lasted 2 years, and I nearly died in the process. However, without therapy and without medication, just pure perseverance, I made it through. I still bear the emotional scars, but I am no longer affected by the person who caused this. I never thought I would get over it, but I am so happy now. Story 69. Becoming the person who checks their bank account before buying coffee turns out, adulting hits hard. Story 70. I got married at 40. I was convinced it was never going to happen for me, so I stopped trying to be anything but who I wanted to be. Turns out that approach works. Story 71. Bury my 20-year-old son. It has been 10 years, but nothing about it ever changes. I miss him and all the life he should have lived in these last 10 years he has been gone. Story 72. Being diagnosed with brain cancer as a 28-year-old physician and still living 1 year after that to share my experience. Story 73. I didn't know if I thought it would ever happen, but I got a driver's license. It has been a few months since I received it, and I am not even the worst driver, believe it or not. Story 74. Get divorced twice before the age of 31. I made the wrong choices when it came to men and settled. Yes, I had issues with my father, I have gone to therapy, and I am in a much better place now. Story 75. Getting into a healthy relationship for the first time. I honestly never thought I would be in another relationship after my divorce, let alone a healthy one. Story 76. I never thought I would become a teacher. For many years, I believed I could never take on that role. After a career in healthcare, I accepted a position in a school to align my schedule with my children's. I absolutely loved it. Now, I teach mathematics at the high school and college levels. It turns out that I am not suited to be an elementary teacher, as I lack the necessary skills for that position. High school teaching is where I truly belong. Story 77. Permanent irritable bowel syndrome from an infection and subsequent bacterial overgrowth prevents me from tolerating fruit. I assume no one wants to hear about unexpected sexual topics. Story 78. When I was 19, I agreed to put my auto repair bill on credit. I didn't have to make a payment for 6 months. In other words, it felt free because the odds of that much time passing seemed unlikely. Story 79. I was set on ending my life when I turned 28, starting from the age of 11. Last year, I decided not to. There are more disadvantages than advantages because I never had substantial development to support myself. Although it's a difficult journey, it's a work in progress. Story 80. Having a second chance at life can be transformative. When you're in the darkest part of your life, feeling depressed and angry at the world, it can be easy to give up and feel as though you want to retreat. It's challenging to find motivation when you feel you've lost everything you care about, but life continues. Story 81. I struggled to conceive and spent a lot of time reading about other women's experiences with polycystic ovary syndrome and endometriosis. I felt so bad for them and was grateful that I didn't have those issues. I was so sure of this that when my fertility doctor did an ultrasound of my ovaries and said, "Wow, those are some classic polycystic ovary syndrome ovaries," I immediately responded, "Oh, I don't have polycystic ovary syndrome." Turns out I had both. Story 82. Going back to school, working full-time, and dealing with skin cancer has been challenging. I have a 3.5 GPA and had to undergo immunotherapy 4 months after being cancer-free before the cancer returned. I didn't think I would manage, but I am. Story 83. I never thought I would achieve recovery from my eating disorder. I haven't slipped up in a year and a half, and I am committed to ensuring I do not relapse. Story 84. I never thought anyone I knew would die by suicide. Then my sister passed away, and a few years later, my high school sweetheart and best friend also died. Story 85. I never thought I would lose my father at such a young age. My friend's father passed away when she was 12. I felt so bad for her and couldn't imagine losing my dad so young. A few years later, I lost mine. I was 15 and he was only 38. Story 86. First, I thought I would never become an addict. Then, after I became one, I thought I could never get sober. Thankfully, I was wrong. Story 87. Living to be 53, I figured that the way I was growing up, I would have either earned a Darwin Award or taken my own life. Story 88. I never thought I would move to Estonia in 4 days without any long-term plans. 1 minute, I was relaxing in my comfort zone, and the next, I was booking a one-way ticket. I had no job lined up, no place to stay, just a mix of excitement and mild panic. Story 89. I always thought I would die young, like before the age of 25. It wasn't anything dramatic like substance abuse or depression. It was just a feeling. I felt like I didn't know enough people who died young, so I was going to be the one to die young. Story 90. Being in a rollover car accident, getting divorced, turning 30, dealing with multiple chronic illnesses, and being administered naloxone during surgery due to an overdose of fentanyl. Story 91. Burnout was not taken seriously. I believed it was like an electric allergy. It turns out that individuals on the autism spectrum with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder are at a high risk. I honestly thought I was sick and dying. 8 years later, I still feel like my brain is only operating at 70% capacity. Story 92. Finding love and marrying my best friend. I am really struggling with mental health. I had to quit my job and start over. Story 93. Making it to 30. I had been planning to die by 25 ever since I was a teenager. My mother passed away when I was 7, and my father followed shortly after, being shot 29 times by police 10 months and 3 days later. On a positive note, I found love and had a child. I have been with my husband for over a decade now. Having his child made me want to stay alive. Story 94. Practically everything in my life did not go the way I thought it would. I never imagined I would stay in an abusive relationship, but I did so 3 times. I never thought I would be a victim of sexual assault. I never expected to develop a chronic, debilitating illness. I never thought I would accept a life where I am not an artist. But I also never thought I would live to be 25. I was certain I would have died by suicide a long time ago. I am now 32. Story 95. My best friend passed away right in front of me. I have her ashes in my house, and sometimes something will happen that reminds me of things she did when she was alive. I have experienced many days where I feel comfort. Story 96. Getting a job. It's been 2 years since graduation, and I thought that was just a theory, but here I am. Story 97. I was the victim of a mugging and beaten near death, sustaining a traumatic brain injury that destroyed my life. A week before the COVID-19 lockdown started, I was attacked and sucker punched while waiting for a ride outside a bar. My head cracked as my body fell back onto the sidewalk. That was the worst of the head trauma. They continued to hit me, stripped me of my valuables, and ran off. The last thing I remember was calling the ride from inside the bar. I woke up in the hospital and couldn't balance, but as soon as I could support myself enough for them to put me in a wheelchair, I was taken home. I couldn't walk, so for the next week, I crawled around on my hands and knees to navigate my apartment. I endured the last month of my lease there, experiencing terrible symptoms like widespread pain, intense sensitivity to light, constant migraines, and even after getting off my knees, I'd randomly lose my balance. My short-term memory was almost non-existent. I would end up in my kitchen not knowing how or why I got there. My company was in the live event space, and 85% of employees were laid off a couple of weeks after my mugging, including myself. I may have otherwise been retained, but they included me in the layoffs to avoid being responsible for my health issues. Employment lawyers thought I had a case in normal circumstances, but nothing was sticking with the pandemic-related layoffs. I moved home, and mounting medical bills quickly depleted my savings. I lived off unemployment benefits while that lasted but ended up broke and still not ready to work. The first job I eventually tried, I was laid off for having too many migraines. Every time something went wrong, there would be a significant setback in my healing, or I couldn't continue effective treatment due to lack of funds. The family member I moved in with was incredibly toxic, lied, and gaslit me constantly, actively undermining my attempts to improve my health and calling me a hypochondriac. I started drinking and smoking more to cope. I gained 80 pounds from emotional eating. I felt like I was in an impossible situation. That was 3 years of my life. Finally, about 2 years ago, some other family members coordinated to move me to another state near them. I joined Alcoholics Anonymous to quit drinking, which helped me reconnect with God, and I started practicing intense gratitude. I lost the weight and received better medical treatment and counseling to deal with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. As my PTSD improved, the symptoms of my brain injury also got better. I began somatic therapy, which helped tremendously. The body keeps the score changed my life. I get to see my nieces and nephews several days a week, and they bring me great joy. After 2 years of this support, I am finally ready to re-enter the workforce. I can't go back to the data work I used to do. The lasting effects of the injury impacted my quantitative skills more than my verbal and written abilities. Therefore, I decided to become a therapist, and I'm currently applying to master's programs in marriage and family therapy while also searching for a part-time job to help pay my way through school. I found a girlfriend earlier this year. We're very much in love, and I see long-term potential there. My life is on the rebound, and it's actually better for it. I wouldn't undo the attack if I could. It led me to Buddhism, which changed my understanding of the world and how I interface with reality. It brought me to a close personal relationship with God that gives me everything I have. It led me to a truer vocation that is more purpose-driven and in line with the change in values this journey has caused in me. It brought me wisdom and happiness. Story 98. There are a few important things in my life. Losing my mother at a young age is one of them, and I may soon have my dream job if everything goes as planned. Story 99. Losing the ability to do the things I love doing as easily as I used to before the age of 30. Story 100. I had a child at 41. I thought that if I hadn't had one by 40, it wasn't going to happen, but it did. Then, less than 2 weeks after her 4th birthday, her father suddenly passed away from a heart attack while sitting next to us on the couch. I never thought I would be a widow and a single mother at 45 years old, but here I am. Story 101. My mom got 2 big tattoos after being completely against tattoos during my entire childhood and early adulthood. After her first tattoo, which she got at 47 years old, she decided to get another one from her wrist to her elbow. Story 102. I would fall in love, move in together, suddenly begin to experience abuse, become pregnant, leave the man, and go through the last 2 trimesters while raising a child alone. Story 103. Getting divorced, meeting the love of my life, being happy every single day, and feeling grateful that I didn't settle for a life with my ex-husband. Story 104. My first baby was diagnosed with a serious birth defect before birth. I never thought that would happen, nor did I think I would undergo fetal surgery at 24 weeks to have a team of doctors operate on my unborn child. I also never expected to have another baby with the same birth defect 6 years later, after being told there was only a 3% chance of that happening. Story 105. Becoming a septuagenarian, I am the oldest member, aside from one blood relative on my father's side, since the 1600s. I took Social Security early, thinking I might enjoy a few years, and here I am a decade later. I returned to the gym to mitigate atrophy and the usual symptoms of aging since turning 62. The cataract surgeries went well, and I received Bacillus calmette-Guerin treatment issued by the Veterans Affairs. They also provided me with expensive hearing aids. I survived cancer, carotid artery repair, hernia repairs, gout onset, and persistent arthritis. Still, I am sticking around. My doctor asked how I wanted to manage pain, and I said, "Suck it up. Old age is not for the faint-hearted. Life is good." Story 106. I had to have my baby at home in my bathroom because I wouldn't make it to the hospital in time. I only saw this in movies and never thought it would happen to me. Story 107. My sister was murdered, and then the police lost all the evidence and marked it as a suicide without any investigation. You never think it's something that would happen to someone you care about, and you would expect people to at least care if it does. They don't. Story 108. I got pregnant, but my son had a fatal diagnosis. He died. I was able to give birth to him and spend time with him. He was so cute. I never thought that would happen. I also didn't think my parents would die a day apart, but I'm alive to tell the tales. I am hanging on by a thread. Story 109. In 6 months, I lost my mother, was drugged and sexually assaulted by my father-in-law, and lost a good friend in the army. Story 110. Multiple pregnancy losses. I got pregnant quickly with my first child and was hopeful that would happen again. Now that we are trying for a second child, we are 2 years in and have experienced a miscarriage and 2 ectopic pregnancies. It's heartbreaking. Story 111. Becoming a physician. My grandfather had a 6th grade education, and my parents barely graduated high school in the 1970s. Born and raised in poverty, I never considered college an option until my senior year of high school, when my grandpa told me that he believed in me and wanted me to get an education. I received full financial aid throughout the process. I never planned on attending medical school because people like me and my family don't become doctors. At 20, I got an entry-level job in healthcare and then decided to pursue my goal and see what happened. Every step of the way, I had people telling me it probably wouldn't work out, discouraging me by discussing how hard it is to become a doctor, and asking why I didn't just be a nurse instead, which is misguided. Nurses are not a lower form of doctor. It's an entirely different career. I faced boyfriends who said no man wants to be with a woman who out-earns them and that it would be unfair for me to attend medical school and neglect them. Other individuals in similar circumstances told me that getting an education was a scam and that it was foolish to take on debt for school. It's not if you make the right choices. When I struggled, instead of encouraging me or showing belief in my potential, people would just say it was okay to fail and suggest that I should give up, come home, and work full-time. I honestly never thought this would actually happen. I am now about 3 years out of residency, and although it was incredibly difficult, I am glad I kept going. Story 112. I never thought I would become a stay-at-home mom in my 40s. I am managing housekeeping and the playground and school activities while searching for new mom friends. I didn't even think I would have children. Story 113. I was in an abusive relationship for 12 years. I didn't realize how emotionally abusive it was until I got out. Story 114. Losing my mom to anything other than old age, especially while I was pregnant with her first grandchild, is incredibly difficult. Story 115. Moving to Canada for political asylum from the United States has been a significant consideration for me. I have always imagined exploring different countries for various reasons, but this situation stands out above all. Story 116. Living on scraps of affection. It is a business of family, not the loving kind. I never thought I could settle. Alas, that ship has sailed. Story 117. Figuring out that I am non-binary after decades of life without a clue is challenging. It can be difficult to transition from rarely considering your gender to thinking about it constantly while you are discovering your identity. Story 118. Fascism. That is only supposed to happen overseas, right? Thinking seriously about how to seek asylum is not something I expected when I planned for adulthood. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.